What's up, guys? Welcome to the Unlikely Journey, episode 2. I'm here with my best friends, Natalise and Jess, and we're going to kick it off this morning with the topic of rebranding yourselves and managing multiple identities. You know, last time we were touching upon this idea that to really be, I don't know if successful is the word, but to really have a healthy understanding of self and managing our own expectations, oftentimes it's critical to be able to flexibly transition from one brand to another brand. And I want to follow up on this topic. You know, both of you guys have done many things and have been able to sustain a high level of success. I'd like to find out from both of you what it's like to manage that. And I'm not talking about like manage the functional stuff, but like emotionally managing this identity change. Do you guys ever face like imposter syndrome or, you know, when you're not sure about the new role that you're in, how do you get yourself into a higher mental state so that you can activate your skills and your gifts?
Yeah, I mean the one word that stands out from sort of like your question is imposter syndrome, right? And I'm gonna be really honest here and say that, even when I started my music career, I had imposter syndrome, right? Like there was no one out there who looked like me, or had there was no one for me to necessarily like look up to. And so when I, had the song on the radio and had shows, for me it was like, wow, like what am I doing here? Like what am I, am I right? And can I make this last? And so certainly there was that element at play there. And when I was in the midst of my music career, I would look around, and I think I alluded to this in the last episode, which is that it, I naively found out that it was not a good look for me to share with people that I went to Stanford, because immediately it was like, okay, well, she's an academic, so she's not that creative. And people, not like people said that directly, but it was sort of this indirect kind of perception that sort of was revealed later, and it happened a few times over. And so again, it was like, okay, well, again, there's no one like me. So am I really cut out for this? I don't party that hard. I don't, I'm not like in the scene. I don't like network like that, like other people do. And so what does that mean for me? And then when I went back to Stanford to get my MBA, it was like, okay, also then sort of the odd one out. Um, it's like, okay, do I belong here? Am I smart enough for this? Am I proficient enough in my financial understanding and business acumen? And even now with parallel health, but before I started, one of the things that I really explored in myself was, am I fully cut out to start a biotech company? What I came out to at the end was, I'm going to try. And yes, like I am, I'm going to muster the confidence to do this.
Thank you for that. I also think that a great part of potentially overcoming imposter syndrome is our ability to learn really fast, right? I think Jess talked about that in our last episode, to be able to acquire skills on the fly and understand that the world is always changing at the speed of light and being able to adapt really fast can really help us overcome what we believe our identity to be at that moment. You guys all know this. We're as good as yesterday. Your last platinum album, that doesn't mean anything if you can't follow up with another platinum album. Your last startup is nothing if you didn't do an exit. So we're always having to think ahead and plan for who we're going to be. And Jess, I'm going to pitch this one to you. You have gone like a 360 from doing some highly creative entrepreneurial stuff on the admin side, and then you went on tour and became this musician. But now you're sort of back to ground zero where you're like kind of building businesses and looking at operations. Tell us about the transition. Tell us about that full circle.
Yeah, I mean, I love I actually love this topic of imposter syndrome because I kind of I relate a lot to what Natalie's was saying. Like I think it's interesting when you start off like an artist. I've been performing since I was super young, and you're very aware of the image you have to project, right? People want to hear one style of music from you or one look, and like you embody that one thing. And I think what I've been learning, like just jumping back and forth between creative biz, and for me, it kind of one always goes in hand with the other. Like it just is like a necessary evil. Like I kind of feel like it's like doing the homework part of the creative. Um, yeah, I mean, most people don't know. Like I think there's this perception on the outside that people actually know what they're doing, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but like you're always, if you're an entrepreneur, you're always doing something for the first time, and you're not like of course there's that feeling, right? And I think where I've been gaining a sense of confidence is I'm an over prepared type human. I take online courses, I buy books, and I get my toe in the water probably further along the line than some of my friends who are a lot more bold than me, who are entrepreneurs. And I find that there's certain skill sets that I have acquired that actually at least put me in a position where I can navigate, I can navigate the new environment. That I'm in. But yeah, I mean, it is a lot of going back and forth. Like, this weekend, for example, a project came in for DTLA Proud. They're doing a documentary and they wanted to have an LGBTQ composer, kind of composer, but more like contemporary pop producer meets composer type situation. And so it's like, I still toggle between that creative side, and the business executive side, where I'm partnering with a producer on that. And we put submitted the tracks this morning and we got hired, and I'm going to be scoring it next weekend. So it's like, it is interesting to kind of like take that step back and I think just straddle between the two sides. But I think I'm finally just letting myself have fun with it a bit. And yeah, like what you said, like thinking outside of the box comes from being creative, and like the higher up I climb, the more I realize that it is confidence. It's like what Natalise said, like, her saying, like, she has all this education, but at some point you have to say, I'm in a position where I can do this. Like I have to have the confidence to know that I have a skill set and that I'm going to figure this out. And I feel like that's the fun part. Like where I am in my career right now, it's stressful at times, but it's fun because I'm realizing that there's just a bunch of people also kind of bumbling around with experience, and we're all trying to lock in, with our blind spots and our experience, and come out on the other end in a successful place.
You know what, Jess? It's so funny because there's an analogy that you said like years ago, and I don't remember in what context you said it, but it's always stuck with me.
Hmm.
Where we were talking, and maybe we were talking with someone else, and you said, we're all still just playing cops and robbers, and that is true. It's
Yeah.
and I think in addition, Steve, to like what you said about adaptability, and maybe that was from Jess as well. It's like it's adaptability, but it's also being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And if you can harness that and
Yeah.
be calm in that uncomfortability, then there's so many things that you can do.
Yeah, I love that. Because at the end of the day, I don't know about you guys, I was never given an owner's manual to how to be an entrepreneur. I've always had to go out there and have really thick skin, put my best foot forward and have that foot get stepped on like many times and then not cry about it, right? So it is going out there, making your failings and learning from them. But I think there's also a speed component too. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys. You don't get very many opportunities if you don't recover really fast. As entrepreneurs, we have to overcome so many fears and so many failings over the course of 24 hours. Give our listeners a sampling of, like, in the course of one day, pick a day out of the week, pick a really, really stressful day. How many decisions do you have to make? How many amendments do you have to make to right some wrongs or to keep relationships intact or to keep these contracts going? Let's start with Jess. Give us an idea.
It's on some of the more stressful days, like, I think the irony of getting good at something and then climbing the ranks is that then your job is literally just unraveling problems. And at the days where I don't have to unravel a ton of problems, that's when I can kind of ideate and look to the look forward, and plan kind of from a more calm space. But yeah, it's a lot of, people come to me with my team when there are issues and there's problems. If it's moving smoothly, usually I'm just kind of CC'd on some emails and seeing things. And it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot of decision making. But I also think, like, if you have a good team under you, you're pulled out of some of the details and you can see the bird's eye view. But yeah, I think, like, at my level, like I'm an SVP with our company, like it is just the bigger the deals, the more phone calls, the more hand holding. I mean, I hadn't lost, I had a day a week and a half ago where we were dealing with, 3 different types of deals over 100,000 each. And, they were all at walkaway points at different times during the day. And it was for 3 different clients and networks and artists and, bands and lawyers and managers, and each one was just as important to all those people and just as important to me because I'm in charge of facilitating that these deals go through. And yeah, I mean, just every once in a while I would just take out my little I have this pillow, that meditation pillow. I would just lie on the floor and breathe because I'm alone. It's still the pandemic, so people can't see me lying on the floor in the middle of an office. But I mean, it's just, you have it, you don't have it, you have it, you don't have it. You just have to be able to like ride the roller coaster a bit and just breathe. I don't know if you guys ever feel like that.
Yeah, I feel like that right now, actually.
Aw. What's going on with
No.
you, Steve?
Yeah, what's going on with you?
Well, it's a day in the life of Steven, right? So we're a company that services schools, and many of our deals are dependent upon schools opening. So if we kind of look across the country, we have to basically facilitate our deals around how certain jurisdictions are mandating school openings and compliance and all these different things. So very similar to what you said, Jess. It's like at any point in the day, there could be multiple walkaway points. As a co-founder of the company, it's not only about keeping these deals intact, but making sure the morale is high with the company and making sure that all of our employees are feeling appreciated and that we keep them highly motivated to look at the bigger picture and to look a little bit further down the road as well. So it is managing expectations and keeping relationships intact, both externally with the customers as well as internally with our employees. So, that's a little bit of what I'm going through. Natalise, I
Yeah.
have a question for you. I didn't go to business school, but I'm just curious, you graduated from Stanford Business School. How much, or if any, was your education touching upon some of these things that we're discussing today? Like actually like managing, I don't know,
Mm,
pivoting, managing failures and all of that. Yeah, because I know, I have many friends I've graduated from Haas
yeah.
and Stanford. And from talking to those guys, it's more like a lot of business theory, math, business
Yeah.
curriculum.
Yeah, I think Stanford's a special place. I can't, obviously, I didn't go to any other business school, so I don't have a direct comparison. But I will say that the one thing that is wonderful about GSB is that there's so much emphasis on the human element of business. Sort of this sort of idea that's sort of pervasive in the school is that yes, like financial reporting is important. Like putting together your board, like having tactical strategies around growth is like important. All of those things are important, but they can also be learned if you are smart. The thing that's harder to learn because you have to experience it is that human connection. So one of the most famous classes is a class called Touchy Feely, and we talk about perception of who you are. And it's hard to describe. It could take a whole other episode to talk about it, but really, people essentially give you feedback on how they perceive you, for better or worse. And you learn about yourself as a leader, and you learn how to be vulnerable in the right situations, and all of that. It teaches you how to communicate in an effective way, so that you're holding space for others and you're not crossing the net and all of that. The other really one of my favorite classes is a class called MGE. It's like managing growth and enterprises. But really, you talk about failures. You talk about the sort of these pivotal moments that happen in a company when if you don't fix this problem, it's gonna be the end, right, for the company. Something catastrophic happens and you have to you know, solve it. Or, one of your co-founders leaves and what do you do? How do you have hard conversations? I think these are the moments that can make or break your company.
Jess, I know that you mentioned last time that you didn't go to business school, but you did go to NYU, which is a really hard program to get into. What did you study there, and how did that education impact your success?
That's a good question. I mean, well, first off, just to weigh in on what Natalie said, I actually was I was like fun being a fly on the wall, Natalie's, with you going to school. Like I lived vicariously through you, like in your like Stanford experience, like whatever you would share with me. And I remember you going through that touchy feely class and just like, I mean, just the level of bravery, but also just the self awareness, like the what you get to be able to understand how you're perceived, and realizing that, like, you're right, like, you can learn numbers, but if you're going to be a leader, you have to deal with people. Is just, yeah, it just, I had so much fun with you there and being your friend and getting to hear about it. Yeah, I studied political science and psych. I was a super nerd, super nerd. Actually, when I was home this weekend, my parents actually gave me my degree, and like all these certificates had been sent to the to the house that I'd never seen, like founders awards and things. Like, it was just funny because they shipped them to my parents' house, so I was like, oh, I didn't know I got this. I was super nerd. I just loved school, and yeah, I think it structures your brain differently to have to write political papers and study in that kind of like more of a classic liberal arts setting. But yeah, I super nerdy. I did, 50-page papers on the history of Chinese economics and development, and then I took my diploma and handed it to my parents, and I went right back to playing clubs in New York and bartending, much to their horror. But yeah, I don't know. I what got me through college, honestly, guys, was I had study groups. I made little flyers up with people. I would look for the smartest person in the room. I mean, I was always really book smart, but I knew what I didn't know, and if I was struggling, I would ask if I could hand out quarter sheets, and I would find the smartest people in the room, and I would hand out quarter sheets to them, and I'd ask if they wanted to be friends and do a group with me, and pretty much everyone said yes. And anytime I was struggling in a class, like that's how I got the grades. I would say is knowing kind of where I was. I just completely was lost, and not being afraid to find the people who were smarter than me and ask them to help and create a little bit of a community fun vibe around that, so we all did better.
What about today? How are you guys learning today? What's your system to acquire knowledge really fast?
Yeah, I mean, I probably am not as thoughtful about it as I should be, but because there's so much that needs to happen with the business, on a day-to-day, but I do, register for webinars and conferences that I think are really relevant. I read books. I mean, luckily I live with, my husband is an avid reader, and so he's constantly giving me books to read, so I'm reading alongside with him. I think it's and trying to get that depth and breath is really hard, but I think it's just continually being open and making time for it.
What about you, Jess? What's the fastest path to acquiring knowledge these days?
Um, I would say being open to it. I listen to audiobooks all the time, morning, noon, night. I'm in music, so when I'm not listening to music for work, which is most of my day, I'm listening to podcasts that, anything I'm interested in. I find a podcast, I Google it, I buy books, I take courses or classes. If I think it's something that, it seems to be priced well, and from someone that maybe I've heard speak on a podcast, or I've read some articles on and I think I could learn, or I've read their books. But I'm always taking, just different one-off courses. I think at this point in my life and career, like, I would love to go to school because I love school, but it really is just kind of damage control. Like, I hit up against a wall of something that I'm feeling a little out of my depth in, and I just kind of seek out knowledge and people who know it better than me. And yeah, books, podcasts, classes. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I'm a little bit different. My mind is so scattered all the time that it's actually quite difficult for me to stay focused and streamline. Like, at any given point in time, I'm thinking about 100 different things. So for me, it's believe it or not, I do my best learning while I'm driving in the car. Like, I'll drive and I will not have a destination to go to, and intentionally. And I just like drive, and for some reason, that puts me in a really calm place. And in the car, I'm able to hone in on like one or two key topics, and then I will literally look at potential parking. If I can find parking somewhere, I'll park, and then I'll take my journal out and I'll write down my ideas and I'll concretize some thoughts. And then from there, I'll be like, okay, do I want to grab something to eat at the closest restaurant or the closest cafe within walking distance from my parking spot? And then I'll do a little bit more thinking as I'm walking. But most of my learning really just comes from this, I don't know, it's almost like an intuitive place. I think about an idea and then I research it. So it's almost like the opposite of like picking up a book and then learning from a book. For me, it's like developing an intuitive notion and then like vetting that out to see if there's a place to go from there. It sounds super weird, right?
No, I think that's awesome. I mean,
No,
I
it's
think that's
great.
really intentional, right? It's like you're not wasting time. Um, you're going right for it. So I think that that's actually a really interesting strategy. I think one thing I'll add to that in terms of attaining that depth and breadth is purposefully diving into something that you would never dive into, or learning about ideas that are opposite to yours. Sometimes I think that can spark creativity in sort of that tension. I don't know if that makes sense.
I love that.
I mean, that's, I think, one of the things that I appreciate about, many things I appreciate about our friendship, and the fact that we've been regularly meeting, is we're like-minded in so many ways, but we also have such a different way of getting to the same place at certain points, and it's just been wonderful to be able to get a different perspective, and when you're confronted with an issue and your own way of thinking, and I mean, even if it's not linear.
Jess, I raised this to you before. I think like some point in the future, it would be incredible for the three of us to start a venture together. I think you've actually said, oh, wow, that would be a crazy idea. But I do think that the three of us, interestingly enough, we work really well together. Like, I mean, how would you describe us, Jess?
Gosh, I mean, Steve, like, you have a way of like cutting through in a very direct manner, like pulling it all together, but being as much as you say that you're scattered, you don't come across as scattered. You come across as a very purposeful thinker, and someone who can execute. And Natalise, similar, but you have a much you have a way of like taking it in, listening, and then the way that you sum it up and the perspectives that you see, it's so well thought out from a different perspective, that's a little bit more, I don't say bird's eye view, but also the human element. It comes from a different human element, of who are the players, you know, let's look at it from this perspective and that perspective. It's a little bit more, I would say, yeah, that's it. It's perspective based.
Can I add to that, by the way, Natalise? I don't mean to put you on blast here, but I was speaking to a VC friend of mine that just closed a huge fund, and I was following up. I was like, hey, did you talk to my friend Natalise? Yada, yada, yada. And you know what his response was? He's like, yeah, I spoke to her. She's really special. And I have to agree with you. There's something about
Oh
the way
yeah,
that Natalise,
100%.
yeah,
Blush.
yeah,
You are. I love that.
no, it's true. It's true. Like I come across so many entrepreneurs all the time, business people, operators, and I think you're right, Jess. There's something about the way that Natalise processes information. She's like you kind of don't know what the hell she's thinking about, but then when she opens her mouth, you're like, oh, it all makes sense.
Yes, yes, because she has that. You do, now. At least you have this, like, you can tell you're very good at listening, and like you can just tell the wheels are turning, and then you're not going to get what comes out of your mouth is usually unexpected in the best way possible. Like, it's unexpected in a way that you've managed to pull together all the things that you've listened to, and yeah, it's always like a unique take on something that would be seemingly obvious, but you were able to pull it all together. Again, being on the other side where we're presenting issues to you, like, yeah, it's a really amazing way that you operate, and yeah, there's that quietness, and then you zing it all together in such a nice way.
Ah, thanks, guys. This is like
Well, we have to embarrass you every once in a while. So now is your turn, Natalise. How would you describe Jess?
Jess is like, so when I first met Jess, I was like, man, this girl's smart. And like, but you're like edgy too. And I was telling, I forgot who, maybe it was my husband, but I was like, Jess is like a combination of, I'm not going to take shit from anybody, super smart, really quick-witted, and like really thoughtful. And like that combination is rare, I think, and it's been such a wonderful learning for me, um, because there's so many attributes just that you have that I aspire to.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, like just in terms of connecting with people and sharing your ideas. Yeah, I mean,
I have to agree. And there's another element about Jess that I really am inspired by. She has like sick discipline, like sick discipline. Sometimes I'll be like calling her and I'm like, yo, what you up to? And she's like, oh, well, where should I start? At 6 o'clock, I'm going to go to like do my F45 workout. At 7, I'm going to go on a hike. At 8, I got to do these financials. At 9, I got to meet with these record labels. At 10, and it just goes on and on and on. And then I'll check in with her by the end of the day, and I'm like, so what's progress? And she's like, yep, all done. I'm like, what? How how is she able to do that? But there is something very God, what's the word that I want to use to describe you, Jess? It's like, oh, you're very firm in your affirmations. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. And not only do you do it, but you always seem to learn something from that experience and you bring it back to the table. And that's what, I'm actually really looking forward to soaking up all of your financial literacy information that you got from the Tony Robbins seminar. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I'm going to soak that up.
Oh, thank you guys.
Yeah, with that being said, guys, we are out of time. So for next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about building wealth. Signing off today, this is Stephen Khuong with Natalise and Jess Furman. This is The Unlikely Journey, Episode 2. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.